This presentation provides a behind-the-scenes look at my work as a student on a short film titled Oh Noisy Motor Rats, which was created as part of the Module Masters Project, MVC 705 Major Project. Introduction. This is a short documentary film, approximately 15 to 20 minutes in length, a so-called non-fiction film, meaning that it is based on real events. Another feature is its observational style, combined with experimentation involving the filmmaker himself, who is the director. The film depicts a conflict with far-reaching consequences between an elderly man who cannot find peace in the home where he lives, and who is, as it were, representative of the entire neighborhood affected by the problem. The Western Parade area is plagued by a motorcycle gang that disturbs the peace every night. The motorcycles of all the gang members are very noisy due to modifications to their exhaust systems. Nevertheless, these young people forget that they are not on a racetrack, but in a local car park, which neighbors a beautiful stretch of beach and a sizable wildlife reserve. Along the entire length of the street, there are constant wild charges by vehicles that repeatedly exceed the speed limit. There are also races, tire squealing, and revving of engines to produce a loud explosion from the exhaust pipe. There are many high-rise blocks here, as well as smaller houses. This area is a habitat for protected species of birds and other animals, such as foxes. All residents of this area are subjected to an invasion of nighttime intruders who disturb the peace. The film aims to serve an informative and educational purpose and may help to mitigate the impact of the conflict. Drawing on data from rigorous scientific research into the negative effects of noise on human health, we can expect the beginnings of positive change. The film offers a journalistic perspective on the circumstances and catalyzes debate. As the filmmaker, I drew on scientific research findings concerning the physics of the internal combustion engine. The film was made with the intention of raising awareness of the issue and thereby effectively influencing the actions of the authorities, who have so far failed to help the harassed residents, despite having been called upon for assistance on numerous occasions. The film could also make the perpetrators aware of the problem, give them food for thought, and instill a sense of shame in them, which could result in fewer incidents. Idea development. Having learnt from past experiences, when I faced a similar project as a student whilst searching for inspiration and a topic, I decided to look around my own surroundings, among the things generally available to me. It didn't take me long to arrive at the right idea, or rather, intuition. I chose a conflict I knew well, one unfolding in my own neighborhood. As soon as I had identified the project's central theme, I began looking for potential protagonists, both positive and negative. At this point, I moved from theoretical considerations to research. As part of the primary research, I decided to speak to my neighbors, who quickly made me realize that this does not concern only me, but is actually unfolding on a massive scale across the entire housing estate, comprising thousands of people, who are exposed to potential violations of their fundamental rights relating to their place of residence and their physical and mental well-being. This occurs when a group of outsiders invades the area where the residents live, relax, or socialize, and disrupts the lives of others through their inappropriate behavior. The film's main protagonist is Graham, both a resident of the Western Parade estate and a motorcyclist. Graham agreed not only to showcase his motorbike but also to give a genuine interview, which became the backbone upon which the factual content of the reality depicted in the film rests, including its technical and scientific aspects, as Graham is also a doctor of physics and an internal combustion engine engineer. The psychological aspect highlighted by the film is a certain kind of personality disorder among the young people who make up the motorcycle gang. They mistakenly imagine, due to a false impression, that the roar of an internal combustion engine without a silencer means the vehicle travels faster, which is untrue. In fact, the opposite is true, as Graham debunks with arguments drawn from the world of science. In the mind of a person making such modifications to their vehicle, such as removing the silencer, a false stereotype has taken root that this procedure increases engine power. However, as it turns out, it only impairs engine performance, as some of the power escapes as an explosion rather than being transferred to the rear wheel as driving force. 2 solutions to the problem of motorcyclists' exposure to noise. McComb, A. W., Binnington, J. Nash, D. Occupational Medicine, Oxford. Journal of Transport and Health, 2022-12, Volume 27, P. the 101507, Article 101507. As a director, in my work, I pose a kind of rhetorical question to the authorities and law enforcement agencies regarding the shortcomings in their actions. Residents speak of repeated attempts to report the problem of disturbance of the peace at night in residential car parks, which yielded no results other than a single police car passing by an hour after the incident, or none at all. For the actual filming, it proved to be a major challenge, as I worked alone in the first part in observer mode, using that fly-on-the-wall technique. The main problem was that this is a place where filming covertly is impossible, and I was immediately spotted by gang members, which primarily provoked aggression and dangerous advances towards me. For this reason, it was difficult for me to get good quality footage, as any larger camera was out of the question, and I sometimes had to make do with just a shot from my phone. What's more, as we can see in the daytime drone footage, the car park is empty, whilst this gang of pseudo-bikers always gathers in the evening. The next place where I continued my research was the University of Solent. I decided to speak to an expert in acoustics and sound. His name is John, and I found him in an office in a university building. John turned out to be extremely knowledgeable about the information relevant to my film, because, as well as being an expert in acoustics and sound, he is also a motorcyclist. He was very engaged with the issue I was discussing with him, as he agreed on the negative impact of noise on health. Years of riding a loud motorbike and working as an engineer at loud music events had caused him some degree of hearing damage. Even on the track, he still uses a sports version of a silencer, which is much louder than the standard factory silencer that should be used on ordinary roads. The last place where I carried out direct investigations was the police station in Southampton. I was only allowed to speak to the officer on duty, who informed me that the matter was well known to the police, but I was surprised by this officer's behavior. After listening to me, she simply threw up her hands in a gesture of helplessness, suggesting that the police could do nothing. I was advised to call 112 and report the incident if I witnessed any abuse involving misused vehicles in the Western Parade area. However, the woman stated that it was unlikely the duty officer would immediately send a patrol, as police officers are usually very busy. I was shocked by the police's passivity. I then went to. My project also included some background research. My journalistic investigation for the film led me to local institutions involved in the life of the estate. The first place I visited was the local housing office. I had a pre-arranged appointment. I was greeted by a clerk who was standing in for Ms. Julie Osborne, whom I knew. Our conversation concerned incidents of disturbance of the peace at night on Western Parade and my film project, which was intended to serve as a kind of educational tool. I explained that the film could act as a bridge in resolving the conflict between residents and the gang of pseudo-motorcyclists. The woman didn't take me seriously and did everything she could to get the conversation over with. Finally, she handed me a piece of paper with the names of various organizations, such as Citizens Advice, as well as the names of local politicians. As for the part of the film where Graham shows off his motorbike, which has a proper factory-fitted silencer and catalytic converter, my cinematographic capabilities were by then practically free from the constraints that had limited the quality of the footage from the section where I was trying to film the gang's nighttime antics on Western Parade. Graham is my neighbor and friend, who was very patient and cooperative with me to ensure the quality of the footage. I was delighted to be able to test my newly acquired Canon C80 film camera. As for the audio, I also used better equipment, a Sennheiser 610 Malawian Quachars microphone, plus a Zoom FX6 field recorder. I filmed the so-called establishing shots, or opening scenes, using a DJI Mavic 2 Pro drone, equipped with a 6K Hasselblad camera. I also recorded bird singing very early in the morning, when there were no disturbing noises near the housing estate or the bay, using the aforementioned audio recording gear. The scene in which Graham shows off his stock motorbike, which doesn't mean it's any worse than those modified vehicles. I am also a law-abiding classic motorcyclist. I believe that such vehicles can be considered classic and beautiful if they retain all the features designed by the manufacturer, including, of course, the complete exhaust system. This scene was also as technically difficult for me to shoot, as I was working alone as a one-man studio, and since the Western Parade location is in the immediate vicinity of Southampton Bay, the wind was a major problem when it came to audio recording, and so, despite being fully shielded and prepared, the Sennheiser 610 Malawian Quachars microphone, together with the Zoom FX6 field recorder. Despite their solid quality, they failed to protect the recording from the noise of the gusty wind, but also, what is even worse than the noise of passing vehicles, as this happened unexpectedly at a time when there were exceptionally many vehicles on the move. I specifically chose a Sunday for the shoot of this scene as a day with less traffic, but there was still quite a lot of traffic. Filming the scene also required coordination with Graham's schedule, as he, as the owner and driver of the vehicle, was dedicating his time to us. As we know, starting the motorbike and preparing it for the ride involves many steps, as does the ride itself, as special clothing is required. That's a lot of safety routine. Practical research. Location scouting. I also spent a lot of time on practical research. This involved personal visits whilst walking around places where a motorcycle gang gathers, and short races take place, which disturb the peace of residents, not only people, but also animals, as these are areas situated near the water's edge and green spaces. On my very first visit, I came across two groups gathered at opposite ends of the car park by the beach. Some motorbikes were switched off and parked, whilst others were still running, even though their owners were talking to them. Some scenes in the film show precisely such attempts at covert filming, which ended up being very dangerous for me as the person filming. I had to withdraw very quickly, as there were no other bystanders who could have helped me if anything had gone wrong. My presence led to an increase in incidents such as honking, speeding, etc. Each time, I noted that these were vehicles usually marked with the letter L, with very small engine capacities, but which were extremely loud due to the removal of the silencer and catalytic converter. I also noted that these were very young people, not experienced motorcyclists, as they lacked not only appropriate motorcycle gear, but the machines themselves were almost always old wrecks, which are dangerous when driven at high speeds. Below I quote a paragraph from my written work for the module of Master's Project, Proposal and Development, MVC 704, Master's Thesis Noise Motor Rats author Krystian Bojek. The next group consisted of parked cars, also cheap, small-engined models, but very noisy. After a long pause, they started their engines again and began honking their horns. I, too, started filming from a distance. Some got into their cars or onto their motorbikes and began racing wildly around Western Lane. It was then that I realized that, apart from their bizarre taste, these people were also aggressive. While there, I managed to film a few clips on my phone, which later served as additional footage. Bearing in mind the taunts and the aforementioned aggression, I decided not to film the perpetrators of these incidents during the actual filming, as it was too dangerous, and instead used film reconstruction techniques to depict the motorcyclists. I also planned a strategy for recording the audio. Post-production. During the post-production stage, it became clear that the film's concept relied so heavily on sound that the editing process became a wonderful opportunity to experiment with sound and image. Project evaluation. This is a very important project for me. It also concerns the community in which I live and with which I identify, for obvious reasons, with the residents of the estate, but in a way also with the members of the motorcycle gang themselves, who have for some time been disrupting the peaceful life of the estate around Western Parade. I'm a motorcyclist, and I understand these young people's fascination with this type of motoring. However, there is a huge divide and difference between the world of people who pursue their passion for motoring and socializing in a manner permitted by law and in designated areas, and the so-called motorcycle rallies, where short-distance races are held, tires are burnt, engines roar, and exhaust pipes emit explosions and ignited exhaust gases, which manifest as flames and are highly toxic to the environment. Below I quote a paragraph from my written work for the module of Master's Project, Proposal and Development, MVC 704, Master's Thesis Noise Motor Rats author Krystian Bojek. The residents of the estate are mostly elderly, infirm, and poor, and as such are potentially suffering from depression, which lowers their self-esteem. These are people accustomed to suffering, such as Monica, who sees no other option but to use earplugs. With the support of the film, they can fight more courageously for their rights. My research on this topic has shown that the problem exists and is seriously ruining the lives of many people. It is caused by the utterly grotesque behavior of a few ignorant individuals suffering from delusions regarding the misuse of their vehicles. Numerous works by other authors explain the mechanism by which pop culture identifies with motorcycling in this pathological way as an identity crisis among today's youth, who are transported into a fantasy world where the object of passion and self-expression becomes a loud, obnoxious biker. The film is a kind of lament over the state of today's youth and an observation of the formation of gangs and criminal groups. One of the potential interviewees who will appear on camera is Graham. He is a resident of the estate, but also a true old-school motorcyclist who has been riding with passion for 30 years and actively participates in professionally organized motorcycle rallies, and thus legally. Graham criticizes the behavior of young enthusiasts of nighttime escapades. He claims that among real bikers, such people do not count as bikers. He believes that these gatherings provide an opportunity for these juvenile delinquents to take drugs, and that this is the source of their subsequent frenzy of reckless stunts and their unhealthy delight in the sound of explosions from the exhaust pipe of a motorcycle without a silencer. Furthermore, he notes that these individuals often earn a living by dealing in illegal drugs, and their cheap motorbikes serve as a means of transport to their customers. In contrast to the noise of the engines, the film will also showcase the beauty of the surrounding area, namely the sounds of teeming life in the undergrowth, when, for example, in the early morning, no vehicles disturb the silence, and one can hear the beautiful singing of birds and the sound of waves in the bay. In the next stage, I also turned to documentaries on similar themes so that my project could become part of the canon of such films. Numerous observations of real-life facts, specialist research, and the topical nature of the subject will make the film a highly relevant piece of work. I rule out any attempt to film gang members, even from a hidden location or from a distance. I intend to use reenactments and actors, as well as footage from services offering paid video content. I will work mainly with my own equipment. I will use a Canon C80 camera and various types of high-quality microphones. I will film inside the flat, as well as from the window. Conclusion. All visitors to the place where we live are welcome, and the beauty of our corner of the world is well worth the journey they must undertake. However, they should respect the fact that this place is home to many people and creatures. They should switch off their engines as soon as they arrive, and, in accordance with the highway code, drive away calmly and obey the law once they decide to leave. After all, there are plenty of motorways and even racetracks nearby, and that is where one should test the performance of one's vehicles, not under someone's window. What could I improve if I could do it again? I would certainly prepare better for filming on location, particularly when using the fly-on-the-wall technique to film the behavior of a motorcycle gang disturbing the peace at night in the housing estate. I certainly wouldn't go filming alone a second time, as I did during the making of the film. This time, I would at least try to get a sound engineer, someone who could handle the audio professionally. All of this would result in much better sound quality than what I achieved, particularly in the first few scenes. I would also try to achieve better composition in the shots, so I would pay more attention to camera stabilization, especially when filming handheld. As for the interview with Graham itself, I would also try to vary the shots more. But as I say, I was limited by the fact that I had no help and was filming on my own. I would also spend more time on the film during the so-called post-production stage. Bibliography. 1. 2 Solutions to the Problem of Motorcyclists' Exposure to Noise. McComb, A. W., Binnington, J. Nash, D. Occupational Medicine, Oxford. Journal of Transport and Health, 2022-12, Volume 27, p. 10150. 2. Noise. 3. Noise, a short documentary film. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=hyx@3xr100. 4. Noise documentary film Paris, 2013. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=2RXI68 Northwest ZM. 5. Noise makes you sick. How can we deal with noise pollution?
DW documentary. https://w.youtube.com/watch, znak zapytania v znak równości fv7 weksipiw 0. 6.
Why noise is bad for your health, and what you can do about it. Matthias Basner. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=UNTWB Bloom. 7. Loud motorcyclists in central London. https://www.youtube.com/shorts/mpqpj6z1 bag. 8. Loud motorbike nuisance gang at Bishan_part2.avi. https://www.youtube.com/watch?v=vqkqjkddptm. This presentation provides a behind-the-scenes look at my work as a student on a short film titled Oh Noisy Motor Rats, which was created as part of the Module Masters Project, MVC705 Major Project. Introduction. This is a short documentary film, approximately 15 to 20 minutes in length, a so-called non-fiction film, meaning that it is based on real events. Another feature is its observational style, combined with experimentation involving the filmmaker himself, who is the director. The film depicts a conflict with far-reaching consequences between an elderly man who cannot find peace in the home where he lives, and who is, as it were, representative of the entire neighborhood affected by the problem. The Western Parade area is plagued by a motorcycle gang that disturbs the peace every night. The motorcycles of all the gang members are very noisy due to modifications to their exhaust systems. Nevertheless, these young people forget that they are not on a racetrack, but in a local car park, which neighbors a beautiful stretch of beach and a sizable wildlife reserve. Along the entire length of the street, there are constant wild charges by vehicles that repeatedly exceed the speed limit. There are also races, tire squealing, and revving of engines to produce a loud explosion from the exhaust pipe. There are many high-rise blocks here, as well as smaller houses. This area is a habitat for protected species of birds and other animals, such as foxes. All residents of this area are subjected to an invasion of nighttime intruders who disturb the peace. The film aims to serve an informative and educational purpose and may help to mitigate the impact of the conflict. Drawing on data from rigorous scientific research into the negative effects of noise on human health, we can expect the beginnings of positive change. The film offers a journalistic perspective on the circumstances and catalyzes debate. As the filmmaker, I drew on scientific research findings concerning the physics of the internal combustion engine. The film was made with the intention of raising awareness of the issue and thereby effectively influencing the actions of the authorities, who have so far failed to help the harassed residents, despite having been called upon for assistance on numerous occasions. This presentation provides a behind-the-scenes look at my work as a student on a short film titled Oh Noisy Motor Rats, which was